are recording a live podcast for the Rugby Players Association called The Player's Voice. This is our first live podcast we've done. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that I'm not alone up here today. I'm delighted to be joined by two Harlequins and England internationals in Shaunagh Brown and Will Joseph. So a round of applause for our guests, please. Good interaction, there we go, that's a fantastic start. Oh, I just realised I didn't introduce myself. Sorry, my name is Ethan Wallen. I am the current RPA chair and rugby player for Northampton Saints, and I will be your relatively lacklustre host for this afternoon. But great to see you both. Really looking forward to your insights as we dive into all things World Cup and England. But firstly, I think we should probably have a little catch up with both of you. Will, we'll start with you as you've got the microphone. It's been a pretty eventful off season for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I was at London Irish before they went bust, and during that off season, I was looking for a new job, and I was also in camp for the first 2 weeks, so I got a little insight to what preparing for a World Cup looks like, and I was lucky enough to get a gig at Harlequins, and I've done about 6-7 weeks there, and I'm really enjoying it, and things are going well, and my feet are settled now a little bit, and just looking forward to the season starting.
How's it been settling into a new club? Obviously, you were Irish through your academy years, and it's the club that you grew up with. Having to have a full shake-up as such, has it been an easy way to settle in?
Yeah, well, like Irish was pretty much home for me. I was there from the age of 11, and it was pretty much all I knew. And joining Quins, it's like joining a new school, joining a new club. But they've been really welcoming, and I've really enjoyed my time there so far. Obviously, I'm really looking forward to playing now because pre-season's pretty tough. But no, it's good. Like, there's a great group of lads, a good coaching staff, and things are going well. Yeah.
So it's the longest pre-season in the world. It's a great move. Shaunagh, brilliant to see you come out of retirement to play for Harlequins again. Talk us through those retired months. What would you do during that time before you decided to come back?
So I had 7 months of being a normal human, which was fantastic. I was eating what I wanted, drinking what I wanted, didn't have to watch for anything. And if I wanted to go to the gym, I did, and if I didn't, I just wouldn't. And nobody was going to tell me off. So I had a wonderful 7 months. But I got a little bit fat, so I thought I'm gonna have to find something else to do and go back to training. But the main bulk of it while I was away, I was coaching in the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean, and I learned a lot about myself on my coaching journey, and a lot about other people and how to work with them and how to talk it, and realise almost how much I actually know about rugby, because I'm a late comer to rugby, and it's always like the butt of jokes, and actually when I talk and talk about what I know, there's a lot going on in my head. So it was good to be around new people, a whole new environment, and take rugby to a different part of the world. But yeah, glad to come home in the end, and now, like you say, back at Harlequins and busting my guts on the pitch.
Do you think that was a big part of why you came back, going out there and coaching again, sort of reigniting that passion, that love for rugby? Is that one of the main reasons you decided to come back?
Yeah, it was almost my moral duty off pitch. Like, I've got so much to offer, both on and off pitch, and everything I do, as much as I love the off pitch stuff, it's only amplified when I play. So coming back and playing, and physically I could and I can. So a lot of it, was about other people and being able to get them to realise that rugby can be for them too. They may not have seen it as the type of person who plays rugby, and they may not have literally even watched a game of rugby, but actually it's catch the ball, run forwards and put the ball past the white line. It's really quite a simple game in my eyes. And if someone gets in your way, run into them. Not around them, obviously, you run into them, of course.
You and me are on the same page with that, Will, not so much. But that's brilliant. But we'll sort of centre back round, because this podcast is not based just around the game today, but about the World Cup in general. We were having a discussion earlier. Most countries have named their squads now, and there have been some surprise inclusions and omissions all around the world. Have there been any that have taken your eye, that have been the news over the last few weeks?
It's more the introduction of, new teams, but teams who are not traditionally rugby nations, and this will be Chile's first World Cup, but also like the strength of growing of the Japanese and Uruguay and Argentina, and you just, like, they're bringing something new to rugby. Rugby's been played by the same type of people for so long, and actually some of it's boring because they're playing the same type, they're on reading the same textbooks, they're doing the same thing, but you just get new brains watching and doing and coaching, and it's like, well, why don't we do it like this? Like, why are we kicking for a penalty and doing a rolling maul every time we get a penalty? Why not tap and go? Like, just little tiny things like that. So yeah, just having new brains and new eyes in the game is what is exciting for me.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you would have, especially before this competition, you would have had USA nailed on to be part of this. And obviously in the World Cup qualifiers, they ended up losing. So we've now got a completely new team in Chile in this competition, having a look and see how they'll go. And that's something I'm really interested to see, the dynamic. But Will, you've worked closely, we'll come on to this a little bit more later, but you obviously work closely with Eddie Jones. You got your first cap under him. He's obviously gone to Australia now, and there's been a lot of buzz in the media about his Australia picks and the players that he's left out in Hooper and Cooper. Unintentional, right? Apologies. But also, he's only taken one fly half with 4 caps. What do you make of those calls? Is that typical Eddie?
Yeah, I would say that is pretty typical Eddie. Like, he's a real character, and what you see in the media is him. And that squad he selected, I knew there would be some surprises, maybe not that many, but him just taking 110, he's obviously got a lot of faith in his young lads, and I think for him, he's probably looking more to the future, going off the squad he's picked. But yeah, he's a real character, and yeah, it'll be entertaining during this World Cup.
I think, seeing him in the pre and post match interviews, the way he operates, like he clearly enjoys ruffling feathers. Do you think there's a part of him that's chosen half of this knowing that he'll probably get injuries and those players will be recalled? Or do you think it's actually a tactic from him that perhaps he's not as fussed about this World Cup and he's looking towards the future?
I think Eddie's big on how people train and what he can see. So I reckon, obviously we're not involved in the Australia camps, but I reckon if you went in there, the young boys are probably out training the older lads, and there's probably a lot of stuff going on behind the scene that Eddie likes in these young boys, and he's probably thinking, well, if they can do it now, and they can do it for the future, and that's probably the reasoning for why he's gone for this type of skill. High
risk, high reward, the Eddie Jones strategy. That's what we like to see. Shaunagh, as the only one out of the three of us that's competed in a World Cup, how important are warm-up games like this? Because we saw last week in Cardiff, I think it's fair to say that it wasn't the most exciting game or the most high-skilled game, but is there a degree of keeping some cards up your sleeves in these games?
Yeah, there's different dynamics when it comes to the warm-up games, and for us, before our World Cup campaign, our squad wasn't selected yet, so it was a chance for us as players to show what we can do, what we can offer, but the men are in a different place, as in their English squad has been announced, and I actually think there might be an element of self-preservation in it as well now. So if you get hurt in this game as one of the boys who's been selected, it's like what I could have done. So yeah, I'm not sure we'll be into a much more entertaining game this week either. But it will be good to see the systems and that stuff, the really rugby stuff go in place. And yeah, certainly you do want to keep a few tricks up your arm before a World Cup.
I think the last time we saw pre-World Cup a loss to Wales and then a repeat fixture back at Twickenham the following year was in 2007, where it was then a 62-point win over Wales. Do you think we're looking at something similar to that today? Or like you say, do you reckon there's a degree of self-preservation about it and it might be a little less exciting?
In a word, no.
But how do these camps differ? So obviously in the Six Nations, you're all together. You spend a lot of time with each other, admittedly for a smaller period, but these games are spaced out pretty evenly. In the World Cup, everything gets so condensed with midweek games, trying to fit in all the pool fixtures. In terms of environment and pressures, is it vastly different?
Yeah, for sure. It's different in a lot of ways. It's different physically as to how much time we spend together. So in a Six Nations campaign, we're sort of in and out between club and country and a bit of time at home if you're lucky. But with a World Cup campaign, we were in from July, well, essentially till the middle of November at the World Cup final. So it's a lot of pressure on you emotionally, being away from your loved ones and being around the same group of people for a long time. And there's no personal space in the fact that you share a room. So like that was something I always struggled with. Like there was no safe space that only I could go into. So emotionally, it's very different. And like I said, the time you spend together, but also it's intense. It's intense because everyone wants to do the same thing. Everybody wants to be in that World Cup squad, and sometimes you think, oh, I thought you was my mate. Why did you act like that? But they're trying to get their space in the World Cup squad as much as anyone else. So yeah, when we had visitors come in, they're like, you can feel that this is for a World Cup campaign. So yeah, I think for me it's very different in so many ways.
And well, obviously, like we say, we've spoken about Eddie Jones, and obviously you've had your experience under him, and he's a bit of an interesting character, to keep it PC. But you've obviously then been in the World Cup camp with Steve Borthwick, two very contrasting characters. In terms of the intensity of the camps, I imagine they're pretty similar though. I imagine everyone's still at the top level. Is there anything huge in the way that you train that's been different between the two?
Well, with Steve, we're training for a World Cup, whereas with Eddie, we'd finished the season and we were going into a tour, so it was more of a pre-season feel with Steve, and he's very big on the running and getting your meters up. Like, we obviously kick the ball quite a lot, and for someone like me, that means a lot of chasing the ball. So that was probably the biggest difference for me, just how Steve's emphasis on kick chase and working hard for each other. And like, I think any World Cup campaign, like, you've got to go into a dark place. I don't know if you've been watching the inside line stuff, but like, yeah, we were going to some dark places, and there's a lot of running, and it's a lot of hard work. Yeah.
It's interesting because I was chatting to someone about the other day, because I think, you know, Borthwick has got a tough job. He's coming to a World Cup year just before Six Nations, got the gig, and he's expected to make the country as competitive as possible, but put his own stamp on it. And there'll be a lot of people saying, especially after last week, you know, is he doing that? But if you look back at his Leicester career, when he first joined Leicester during that COVID period as head coach, you know, they weren't fantastic. And then the following year, that's when they kicked on. Do you think the stuff that Steve's putting in place now in terms of the culture, the team building, the systems that will become second nature, do you think that's going to pay dividends for England, certainly in the future? But will it pay dividends in time for this World Cup to compete aggressively?
I think every coach coming into a new job needs a bit of time, and he's sort of been chucked in at the deep end. And I'm hoping that by the time the World Cup comes, we'll be in a better place. But I'm not sure. We'll see. Like, I think these warm-up games will be big. But yeah, I'm not sure. We'll see what happens in the future. Like, it's hard to say. Obviously, it needs a bit of time, and I think we'll know the answer later on down the line what the case is.
We'll definitely soon see. But I think today, obviously, we've got and Shaunagh, I'll come back to you on this. On that note, we've got a much more traditional-looking England team out today. You know, the returning likes of Laws, Farrell, Itoje. That's what I think fans would be used to. So today, is that going to be something that works in England's favour, or do you think they might not have had enough rugby and integration at this time? How do you think they're going to go with those, you know, traditional style names back?
I think it would be good to settle people and settle the boys in terms of they know who they're playing with, they know the style of the person, they literally know the sounds of voices and know where they're going to be physically on the pitch. And even though someone might not say something, you know what they want because you played for them for so long and so well. But I think it's natural to have like two different styles of squad, even within the short space of a week, because that's what World Cup games are about. It's about giving new players a run out, seeing what they can do, but also emphasising that the World Cup is a long campaign. Your starting 15 is not going to win you a World Cup, and even if players don't get into the 23, which I didn't that often during the Women's World Cup, but you're there, you're training against them, you're running a D, you're running the attack against their D, like you're as much a part of the squad as well, so it's important to give those players value too, and whether that is a bit of game time or something else that makes them feel like part of the squad, because it can be tough as someone who is either not starting or not in the squad at all to go out there and give your 110% all the time. So I think it was good last week to have a different squad, and then equally, like I say, this week it's very normal for it to change so much. And yeah, it'll be probably more like what we think our starting 15 will be when it comes to the first game, but you can only see.
And there's so many, with everyone back fit and everyone firing in this squad, there are so many selection headaches. Do you play Laws in the back row? Do you play Earl? You've got Vunipola. You know, he's our only specialist 8 there at this time. You've got Ludlam, who's been tenacious in the last few games and was fantastic in the Six Nations. You've got the whole debate about Ford, Farrell, Smith. Ollie Lawrence has been brilliant in the centre. Is the experience enough? There's so many different questions at the moment about what partnership's best. But for you two both, I suppose I'm interested, who are your non-negotiables? Who are the people that you think, give me 3 that you think need to be on that team sheet for England to have the best success? Throw you right in the deep end.
Well, I definitely think Freddie, I think he's played every game since he's been in, and he's been excellent, like under the high ball, and he's very safe. You want 2 others, okay? And I think, I'd probably say Ellis Genge, whether that's starting or off the bench. I think the impact he has, like he's a leader and he's vicious, he's aggressive. And then I think Farrell as well is also another leader who controls the game very well and is like the England man, isn't he really? Like he's sort of the pinnacle and he's a real leader. Like working with him, he's pretty inspirational and he sets the standards.
Absolutely. Shaunagh, what do you think?
I'm going to start with Maro Itoje. He's just an incredible athlete. He takes charge of the line-up, he settles it, and as a forward, I know how important it is to have someone who is so calm and controlled when it comes to the line-up, no matter what the situation is with the rest of the game. If your line-up caller is calm and confident and knows exactly what they're doing, then as a forward in the line-out, you're good. I'd also go with Owen Farrell somewhere on the pitch, whether it's 10 or 12, and I do quite like the Smith and Farrell combination sometimes. In terms of, I can just imagine him whispering in Smith's ear every so often, like, oh yeah, that was a good call, mate. So I think, yeah, Farrell on the pitch somewhere, and again, Courtney Laws, I do quite like him at 6, but if they put him in the second row, I'm not going to have a drama. So again, Courtney Laws on the pitch somewhere, but 6 is a good place for him to be.
I don't envy Steve Borthwick because these are some of the hardest decisions to make. But as you mentioned earlier, Shaunagh, that everyone's going to have a part to play in this, whether that's on the training field or whether that's the midweek games. I'm sure we're going to see many more combinations anyway before this World Cup's out. But enough about England, I suppose. In all fairness, we must talk about Wales as well. So we'll dive down then. A pretty underwhelming Six Nations, a rugby ecosystem that externally looks a little bit shaky, as most do at the moment, in fairness. And some key internationals announcing their retirement pre-World Cup. But not just that, but talks of waterboarding in some of the pre-season camps, which is, from the external point of view, pretty crazy. And then they go and beat England in the first game of the millennium. So you could never write off Wales, can you?
No, never. I was very impressed with Wales last week. I thought they looked very fit, and they looked like that. Yeah, that was probably one of the best performances I've seen from them of recent. Like they looked hungry, they looked fit, and it'll be interesting to see how they go today. Like I think they've gone for 2 mixed squads last week and this week. So against an English squad who it looks like the number 1 squad at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how they go today, if they're still at the same levels they were at last week. But yeah, no, they look very strong. I was impressed. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they go at the World Cup, because I think their side of the pool is, like there's 2 sides of the pool that are a bit easier, and I think they're probably on that easier side. So once you make it to the quarters or the semis, like it's anyone's game, so it'll be interesting.
I think there's certainly a lot to say, and having watched, like you say, the big rugby fan in me has watched the O2 Inside Lives, watched the Welsh stuff on YouTube as well. And the Welsh certainly, by the seams of it, have been focusing a lot on that mental toughness and that fortitude. you've both been through a lot of pre-seasons. I mean, we just talked about the fact it's your first full one, but you've both been through pre-seasons. Do you find that those fitness sessions that aren't necessarily the most rugby relevant, but are all about testing your mental fortitude and testing to what darker place you can go, do you think they're actually of more benefit to you during the season?
Short answer, yes, because I say anyone can be physical. You can teach anyone how to be physical. You can teach anyone how to play rugby. But working on someone's mind is such a specialist skill, and no matter how good you are at rugby, if you can't handle high pressure situations, then you're going to fall apart. And I think a lot of it around international camps, and for me, it was purely a test of mental toughness, and you question yourself I question myself so often, and I think, why am I here? Do I want to be here? Am I good enough to be here? But eventually you get round to telling yourself, yes, I'm here because I want to represent my country. I want to do my best physically. I want to make people proud of me. And yes, I am good enough to be here. So yeah, I do question some of the things sometimes. And like you say, they're non-rugby related, and you're like, why are you doing this to me? But it's certainly a mental test. And like going back to Wales a bit with it, it's the off-pitch stuff that is clouding so much of what they do now. And actually, I think it could be to the players' advantage in the fact that quite a lot of pressure for me has been taken off of the boys, and there's been some bad stuff around the women and girls side of it as well. So it's just trying to sort that stuff off. And again, the mental toughness comes in separating the two. And actually, when you go on the pitch, it's forgetting about all of the politics of the game, of the club, of the country, of whoever, and just enjoying yourself. And it is a cliche, but you play your best rugby when you are enjoying yourself.
100%. I completely agree. But I mean, I think just whilst we were talking about it then, I was having some flashbacks of some pretty horrific stuff I've done that have been completely irrelevant to all things rugby. And I'm interested from both of you, can you share with us any of the crazy stuff in a pre-season that's not been rugby related, that's ended up being some just horrible fitness session? I'll give you an example from our side, for example. I think when I was first started at Northampton, straight out of the academy, built like a kebab, into the first fitness session, we have done 300 kilo prowler pushes at the age of 17. I think I was 100 kilos at a push, and definitely none of it muscle. And our head of SSC was ex-military at the time, and I had him this close to my face, shouting abuse at me, calling me a blamont, calling me every name under the sun, and a load more expletives. And I think I went till I threw up and nearly passed out. And that, he said to me a couple of years later, that was the reason why I stayed on, because it's that mental fortitude. So I'm interested. Has there been anything in both of your careers that's been pretty crazy that you've come out the other end of for the better?
Yeah, I've got a couple, and then I've got an observation one. So I start the observation is when I see other teams doing army camps, and like you said, people shouting at you, and I can't do that. Like right there as well, you can shout at me from over there, but right there. So I do think, I don't know if I'd do well at that club, because this is more than once I've seen them do that. So like, can't go there because the pre-season's no good. But then personally, yeah, it normally involves a watt bike, and it involves a lot of shouting, but positive and teammates. So again, even if they're encouraging me, the fact that they're in my personal space, I'm like, I don't like this, and it's only 30 seconds, Wingate's on a watt bike, and you're trying to, my personal number was 1,000 watts, and I was trying to get up there, and it turned out I was pretty good at it, which was like, well, maybe I should turn to cycling. But it didn't stop me from throwing up after every 2 or 3 reps, and you're like, it's literally 30 seconds, why is it so hard? And yeah, that was every Wednesday for quite a few weeks in a row in England camp.
Yeah, well, for me, this is my first pre-season, so I've not got any mental stories, but like Shaunagh just said, we spent a lot of time on the bike. We've done 2 Broncos already, which are pretty tough. And I think later on in pre-season, we might be doing one of those army camps, which I'm not looking forward to. But yeah, no, pre-season, they're pretty dark, but I'm sure mid-season I'll be thankful for it.
You young will, believe me, they'll come, mate. You'll get a few of them soon. Well, that brings us to a close. Thank you all for listening. Can I please get a round of applause for our fantastic guests, Shaunagh Brown and Will Joseph. I've been Ethan Waller. You've been listening to the live version of the Players' Voice podcast. If you do want to hear anything, any specific guests, please get in touch using hashtag the Players' Voice. But all the best. Enjoy the game this afternoon, and go on England. Thank you very much.